So my name is Guy Lane. I'm an Australian environmental scientist, and back in 2018, uh, I've been following the climate and ecological crisis for over 20 years, and was always thinking that there was some underlying cause to it. There was something going on that wasn't being talked about. It wasn't just a political or an economic or a technological issue. There was something deeper. And I didn't know what that was. But then in 2018, I had the insight that the climate and what underpinned the climate and ecological crisis was actually to do with not with what we know, but what we believe. There was that realm that falls in that word belief. I don't think had been properly sort of investigated to understand how its role with respect to the climate and ecological crisis. But as I had these conversations, I realized that this whole conversation around belief was actually much broader than just the idea of religion, but sort of expanded into philosophy and worldview and cosmovision, and that there was a whole spectrum of ideas that could be explored in there. And so as the project has sort of grown over the last 8 years or so, it sort of expanded out to incorporate a lot more territories through the lens of what we believe as opposed to what we know. And that brings in a whole bunch of ideas around sustainable life philosophy, spirituality, and so forth. And so that's really the work of Vita Sapien organization, is to map out that terrain, share these ideas, and see if we can't enroll people to believe right. Because if we have unsustainable beliefs, they're going to lead to unsustainable actions. So at the heart of Vita Sapien's worldview is the idea that all life on Earth is part of a single life force, single living entity that we refer to as Vitae Planeta. And that when life is allowed to go about its business, it maintains conditions suitable to life on Earth, which is Gaia theory. And so the idea is that all organisms should be given the opportunity to flourish, including human beings. And so human flourishing is a term that I learned from I Am Humanity. I love the phraseology. And that's really what we're about. But the framing that we're using is that you don't get to have human flourishing unless the ecosystem flourishes, because the ecosystem is our life support system. And the aspiration that we have, the belief that we hold, is that it is possible for humanity to resolve the Anthropocene crisis, which is the term that we use to describe the climate and ecological crisis and all of the other aspects to that, that it's possible to resolve the Anthropocene crisis with sufficient intact ecosystems that we can actually go into a future that we refer to as the verdant age, which is a time when humans and the living planet thrive in synergy, which is to say that the living planet is better off with humanity. And of course, humanity is better off with the living planet. So there are things that humans can do to actually enhance the well-being of the global ecosystem. And that's really our job. The way that Vita Sapien frames the world is that we human beings are cells in the greater body, and that we have responsibilities to the host to do what we can to look after the interest of the host. And the host in this case is the biosphere. So human flourishing and biosphere flourishing are natural partners. So within Vita Sapien, we have 12 what we call planetary quests. These are sort of like practices, if you like. And one of those practices is called Live with Earthity. And Earthity is this idea of accepting yourself as like a cell in the greater body of the living planet. And that cells in a body have responsibilities to neighboring cells. And so it's really a call to be a good organism, to be a good human being. And so Earthity calls us to live lightly on the earth. So basic sort of things that you'd expect from a good environmentalist, but also to be a decent human being. And which means that you ought not be racist, you ought not be misogynistic, you ought not be transphobic, you ought not be all of these things. Just accept the fact that there are lots of people in the world who may be very different from you, and be kind and tolerant to them. Just be kind is the basic principle. And so from the perspective of human flourishing, if we can maintain a healthy ecosystem and we can be kind to other people, these are the two foundations of human flourishing. If neither one of those is being deployed, then human flourishing is going to be very difficult to achieve. And if you actually use that as a sort of framework and just look around the world at where humans are not flourishing, you'll typically find that they live in degraded environments, and that they are subject to people who have a lot of hatred and a lot of prejudices, rather than just being okay with people being the way they are. I mean, at the end of the day, every organism is pursuing its own interests, and the way that nature functions is that the organisms pursue their own interests in a manner that benefits the whole, benefits the biosphere by providing ecological services. Human beings have got the capacity to do the same thing. We have the innate ability to do the same thing, but because we have free will, we can get steered off into different directions. And really, that's at the heart of the Vita Sapien belief, is the idea that human beings have got this capacity for free will, which is distracting us from our innate practice, which is to make a positive contribution to our societies and to the environment. And if we just simply do our jobs, which is the job that all life on Earth performs, then the flourishing will follow. So spirituality is a term that is used a lot without being properly framed as to what people mean by spirituality. So from our perspective, we talk about spirituality a lot. It is actually probably the aspect of Vita Sapien that makes it distinct from many other organizations, is that we're approaching the Anthropocene crisis through the lens of spirituality and belief. Spirituality has been a feature of Homo sapiens in its full expression for 70,000 years. You'll understand that 96% of that time, or thereabouts, the expression of our spirituality has been with respect to the ecosystem around us, to the wildlife, to the rivers, to the forests, to the weather systems. And that it's only in the last 2,500 years or so, a 500-year period referred to as the axial age, a period in which all of the religions and philosophies that are dominant in the world today were founded. I'm talking about the religions, for example, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Stoicism, all of these ideas came out of this period referred to as the axial age. So that's only the last 2,500 years. And these are the spiritualities and beliefs that have swerved us, human beings, away from our innate nature spirituality. And that is at the very heart of the climate and ecological crisis. And so what Vita Sapien is trying to do is to try and get a fuller measure of that and find a way to reconnect people spiritually to the living planet as a way of restoring the balance between humans and nature. This is really my call to action for people, is that what we've tried to do through Vita Sapien is to try and understand this crisis and the solutions to the crisis through the lens of belief, tied in with the lens of knowledge, because this is grounded in science as well. So the fusion of ecological spirituality and environmental science is what I would call upon people to do, is to open your heart to the living planet and recognize that we're really out of time. We are really out of time. These are the final years of being able to decide the destiny of our civilization, of our species, and of the robustness of our living planet. And so this is really a call to action. And a part of the spiritual aspect to this is, one of the things that's so powerful about spirituality is that there is no greater motivator in human behavior than that spiritual one. If you look at any endeavor where humans are excelling, there tends to be a deep seated passion for the field of endeavor. This is the opportunity for people to develop a spiritual connection to our living planet, which comes with a deeper understanding of it, which is the cerebral aspect, which is the learning of the environmental sciences. And those two things together should create the moral concern for nature that will motivate the extraordinary actions that we need to take in order to create the space for both humanity and the living planet to flourish deep into the long future.